Good day to each and everyone. My name is Algis G. Hall, and today I'm just going to continue the discussion of Marjan Pasandalan, which is he is the first presenter and I was the second presenter. So, i-continue ko lang yung presentation niya na learners with difficulty communicating. Before I'm going to continue the discussion, let's have a short game first, or let's see, short activity. Ganon. Okay, so tinatawag siyang duck race game. So, mag-race muna tayo kung sino yung manalo or di kaya mauna sa racing, then siya yung sasagot sa questions na itatanong ko. Okay, so let's start sa racing. Okay, so yung unang sasagot ay si Agwam. So, Agwam, here is your question. Agwam, what is the difference between speech and language? Okay, thank you so much. So, palakpakan natin si Agwam. So, sa second naman tayo, let's go back to the race game. Ang nanalo ay si Kayamat. So, Kayamat, here is your question. So, what are the key characteristics of language disorders and how are they classified? Yes, thank you so much. Let's give a hand to Kayamat. And mag-race game na naman tayo. Okay, ang nanalo ay si Jamalia. Okay, Jamalia, ito ang iyong questions. It's simple. No? Yung sagot mo lang is real or fake. Children with communication disorders may also experience behavioral difficulties. Is it real or fake? Okay, so the answer is real. Now, again, back to Reese. The winner is Nusaiba. Okay, Nusaiba, here is your questions. How are communication difficulties typically identified in young children? Okay, thank you so much. Let's give a hand kay Nusaiba. Thank you so much everyone sa inyong pag-participate. Now, let's proceed to our discussion talaga. Okay, so as I said, I'm just going to continue the report of Marjan Pasandalan. So I was the second presenter sa aming group. So, dito sa learners with difficulty in communicating is natakot na dito ni Marjan yung sa A, which is yung types of communicating disorder or communicating impairments and disorder. So, now, here is my objective. Before I forgot, no? Ito yung aking objectives. First is to determine the characteristic of students with communication and movement difficulties, appreciate the importance of providing appropriate support and accommodations in an inclusive classroom setting, then recognize the impact of communication and movement difficulties in various aspects of students' life, and lastly, develop strategies to create a more inclusive and supportive learning environment for all students. So, okay, let's proceed to our discussion. So, yun na nga, na-discuss na ni Marjan itong definition, no? Yung types of communication impairments and disorders. We mentioned a lot of types of communication impairments and disorders. Now, let's proceed sa identification. So, communication difficulty is oftentimes one of the most common red flags observed by the family members, daycare workers, and early childhood teachers. So, yung communication difficulties talaga is isa ito sa pinaka-red flag na ma-observe not just by the family members and also yung ating mga teachers. So, sa mga daycare or di kaya sa elementary. So, sila yung unang nakaka-observe sa bata na yung bata na yan is merong communication problem or hindi siya marunong makipag-communicate or may something sa pananalita niya or hindi niya ma-pronounce yung isang salita. So, noted na yung absence, delays, and difficulties in speech and or language open from family members to consult their general pediatrician. So, pag nakitaan na kaagad ng symptoms sa bata na nahihirapan talaga siyang makipag-communicate or there is communication difficulties sa bata, then yung family members na naka-observe or di kaya yung teachers is kinakailangan niyang sabihin sa parents ng bata na yun nga, meron siyang communication problem so that it could mag-ano ng action para ipakonsult yung bata sa pediatrician, general pediatrician or di kaya sa specialist kasi kailangan siyang pagtuunan ng pansin para masolusyonan kaagad or di kaya is maagapan pa yung kanyang communication difficulty or problems or disorder impairments, ganon. So, yun. To screen children with communication difficulties, early childhood professional use questionnaires. Ito yung ginagamit nila for screening para malaman kung meron nga bang communication difficulty yung isang bata. Yung ginagamit is questionnaires and developmental checklists to determine the severity of the delay as compared with typical language development. So, dito para malaman nila is ginatest nila yung bata kung ano ba yung ano niya different doon sa normal na bata. Upon screening is dapat yung bata is it should receive educational supports and accommodation to help address the delay kasi medyo yung screening, hindi siya madali. If the difficulty is pronounced, then dito na dapat mag-take action na kung saan ipapakonsult talaga yung bata sa specialist or some general pediatrician para kung ano ba yung dapat na gawin, kung paano ba ito masolusyonan yung kanyang problems, ganun, para maagapan kaagad. Hindi lumala yung kanyang impairments or disorder. How do specialists determine a speech or a language problem? So, yung ginagawa ng mga specialists, like yung mga speech language pathologists or ELEPs, is gina-determine nila yung speech and oral language problems through multifaceted evaluation process na kung saan include dito yung case history, physical examination, and various assessment tool. Okay. So, now, meron tayo dito mga several components or di kaya yung ginagawa ng mga specialists para ma-determine if there is really communication difficulty sa isang bata. Okay, first is meron tayong case history and physical examination. Dito sa case history and physical examination is yung gina-examine yung history ng isang bata, yung kanyang background or mayroon bang medical problem dati. And then sa physical examination naman, dito is gina-examine yung ng bata, kanyang tongue, kung mayroong mali ba sa tongue niya, sa kanyang lips or di kaya sa ngalangala niya. Kasi it could be the origin. Ito pala yung dahilan kung bakit hindi siya nakakasalita ng maayos or there is something sa kanya when it comes to talking or merong communication difficulties sa isang bata because there is a problem sa kanyang physical. Ini-examine din yung hearing ng isang bata kung meron bang problema sa kanyang pandinig kasi isa yan sa mga dahilan kung bakit nahihirapan siyang makipag-communicate or di kaya magsalita kasi pala hindi siya nakakadinig. So, kung ano kasi yung nadidinig natin is tatatak yun sa isip natin at doon, mariregulate niya kung ano yung sinasabi or ito din yung lalabas sa bibig ng isang bata. Kung hindi siya makakadinig, hindi din siya makakapagsalita. Kaya, meron tayong tinatawag yun sa amin na amang. Kumbaga, is hindi siya nakakapagsalita ng maayos. Kasi hindi siya nakakadinig. Kung ano kasi yung nadidinggan natin is yun din yung alam natin gawin. O di kaya, paano ka makakasalita kung hindi ka naman makakadinig, diba? So, maybe that's one of the problem kung bakit hindi may communication difficulties isang bata. Kaya, kinakailangan siyang i-examine ng mga speech language pathologists. Meron din tayong tinatawag na articulation. Itong articulation naman is skills or assist, which includes ito yung identifying speech errors na kung saan dito sa isang bata sa articulation is there are mga words na hindi ma-pronounce ng maayos ng mga bata. Just like yung salitang lollipop. So yung pagka-pronounce niya sa salitang lollipop is wawipop. So isa yan sa mga dahilan kung may mga bata na ganyan, hindi sila nakaka-pronounce ng maayos ng mga salita. So yun, kinakailangan din i-examine yung yung kanilang panalita. And meron din tayong tinatawag na phonological awareness and processing. So, dito naman sa phonological awareness and processing is that it provides foundation for beginning to read in young children. So, dito, gina-examine yung kung paano ba magsalita, magbasa yung bata. So, yes, children with difficulties in processing sounds in language as well as hearing, segmenting, and identifying phonemes and words may experience problems with expressive and receptive spoken language as well as learning how to read. So, yun nga, pag may problema yung bata sa hearing, segmenting, tsaka identifying phonemes, malaki din yung posibilidad na yung bata is hindi siya makapagsalita ng maayos at saka magbasa. Kasi nga, hindi siya nakakadinig. Ayan. So, kinakailangan din i-examine ito. Then yung overall language development and vocabulary, which is formal test may be used to measure a child overall language development. So, ito na yung pangkalahatan, no, na i-test yung language development ng isang bata, tsaka yung vocabulary niya. And as this affect how will a child is able to understand and use language in spontaneous speech and in academic settings. So, dito malalaman kung marunong ba magbasa yung bata, marunong ba siya magsalita, makipag-communicate. Then, assessment of language function. So, ito naman, language is used to serve several functions. So, there are a lot of function, no, ng language. So, it's really important or crucial sa atin. So, yeah, such as yung pag-request, name, imitate, ask, as, and converse among others. So, emphasize how language is used rather than the structure and form of language. So, meron din tayong language samples and observation in natural setting. So, language difficulties may also be identified through play-based or authentic assessment, where a specialist plays with a child during with spontaneous speech and verbalization can be elicited. So dito sa language samples and observation in natural setting, kumbaga, is yung specialist is magpapaano siya, magkakandak siya ng play-based or di kaya is ipapaano niya yung bata sa papalaruin niya sa mga ibang bata din or specialist, or pwede siyang gumamit ng authentic assessment para ma-determine or maobserbahan niya na mabuti in natural setting yung bata. So doon is maobserbahan niya na ay meron pala siyang problema when it comes to communicating with his or her peers, or di kaya may problem sa kanyang panalita pag nakikipag-usap siya sa kanyang mga peers. So yan, in natural setting siya ginagawa yung test. Then, assessment in speech, language, and communication must take into consideration, the student's cultural and language context, particularly for children, particularly for children growing up in the bilingual environment. So, kailangan natin i-consider din yun, Kasi may mga bata na bilingual environment siya lumaki, na kung saan yung alam lang niya na salita is yung kanyang mother tongue language. Kaya maranaw. So, maranaw lang yung alam niyang salita. So, maybe, isa din yun sa mga dahilan kung bakit meron siyang communication difficulty. Kasi, yung kahalubilo niya na bata, or na mga bata, is Tagalog. Tagalog yung kanilang mother tongue. So, nahihirapan siya makipag-communicate. So, maybe, that's one of the reason kung bakit meron siyang communication difficulty, because he used only his mother tongue language, or di kaya bilingual siya. Yung alam lang niya is yung kanyang mother tongue at saka Filipino, or maybe sometimes na may mga bata na hindi nila alam kung paano pa mag-Pilipino. Yan. So now let's proceed sa learning characteristic. So children with communication disorder often face challenges in social settings due to difficulties with expressing themselves and understanding others. Yes, yung mga bata talaga na mayroong communication disorder is may mga challenges or problems talaga silang nai-encounter pag nakikipagsalamuha sila sa iba, kasi nga mahirap silang magsalita or mahirap silang makipag-communicate because of their disorder and impairments, or yung mga bata is maaari ding i-bully sila. So these struggles can manifest in various ways, including difficulties initiating and maintaining conversation. So isa to sa mga dahilan or mga challenges na nai-encounter ng mga bata na may communication disorders. Nahihirapan silang mag-start ng conversation. Then, understanding social cues and navigating peer interaction. Nahihirapan silang makipag-communicate sa ibang bata. Kasi meron silang communication disorders. Here in table 6.3, meron tayo dito mga language difficulties, Meron tayong expressive language difficulties at saka receptive language difficulties. So, before we, identify kung ano yung mga difficulties na yun, let's define first what is receptive language at saka expressive language. When we say receptive language, it is the input of language, the ability to understand and comprehend spoken language that you hear or read. So, yung example niya is pag yung bata is kinausap mo siya, or di kaya sinabihan mo na put on your clothes, or di kaya maglinis ka, ganon. So, pag yung bata is nag-response ka agad, ginawa niya ka agad, nag-put siya ng clothes, or di kaya naglinis siya, ganon, then ibig sabihin is meron siyang receptive language or alam niya kung paano mag-response doon sa sinasabi mo or naiintindihan niya kung ano yung sinasabi mo. So, that is receptive language. Kung may difficulty siya sa receptive language, then that's mean is mahirapan siyang mag-intindi sa kung ano yung sasabihin mo or mahirapan siyang ano ba yung i-response niya sa sinabi mo. Hindi niya alam. So, yun na nga. Paano ba niya i-understand or i-comprehend yung sinabi mo or the spoken language na narinig nila at saka nabasa? And yung expressive language naman, ito naman yung output. So, kabaliktaran siya sa receptive language. So, dito, it is the ability to express your wants and needs through verbal or non-verbal communication. So, yung mga bata na merong problems or difficulties in expressive language is mahirapan siyang mag-express kung ano yung gusto niya, kung ano yung kailangan niyang sabihin. So, yun, no? Verbally and non-verbal communication. It is the ability to put thoughts into words and sentence in a way that makes sense and is grammatically correct. So, kung ano yung iniisip niya is masasabi niya kaagad or kung ano yung gusto niya is masasabi din niya. So, that is expressive language. So, again, yung receptive language is the input while the expressive language is the output. Kung yung receptive language, kung ano yung sinasabi ng iba is ginagawa niya or kung ano yung nasa iba is na kinakailangan niyang gawin or di kaya i-understand at saka i-comprehend kung ano ba yung i-response niya. While here in expressive language is yung kung mai-express ba ng isang bata kung ano yung iniisip niya, yung needs niya, yung wants niya through spoken language. Doon tayo sa mga difficulties, no? So, ito yung mga expressive language difficulties. Una is limited vocabulary. So, yun na nga. Maliit lang or malimit lang yung alam niya ng mga words or vocabulary. Then, incorrect grammar or syntax. Okay? May mga maling grammar na nasasabi niya. Then, expressive repetition of information. Then, ito yung expressive repetition of information is pabalik-balik lang yung sinasabi niya. Then, difficulty in formulating questions. Yun nga. So, mahirapan siya mag-formulate or gumawa ng questions sa sarili niya. So, yan. Difficulty in constructing sentence too. So, nahirapan din siya mag-construct ng sentence, no? Kung ano yung sasabihin niya, mag-isip, gano'n, nahirapan yung isang bata. So, that is expressive language difficulties. Sa receptive language difficulties naman is mayroon tayo ditong following oral directions. So, hindi niya ma-follow yung oral directions. Such as pag sinabihan mo siya, pronounce the words bag or pronounce the word house. So, hindi niya ma-pronounce ng maayos. Ganun. Then, understanding humor or figurative language. So, hindi siya masyadong nakaka-understand ng mga figurative language or di kaya understand ng mga humor. No? Then, comprehending compound and complex sentence, then responding to questions appropriately. So, hindi siya maka-respond ng maayos sa questions na gina-ask mo kasi meron siyang receptive language difficulties. Nahihirapan siya mag-understand and mag-comprehend ng spoken language. So, why is expressive and receptive language development important? So, bakit ba siya importante, no? So, we use expressive and receptive language skills to communicate with others effectively. If a child meron siyang consistent difficulty understanding others or sharing thoughts, ideas, and feelings, they may have language disorder. Pag nahihirapan sila na mag-share ng thoughts nila, yung ideas, feelings, yun, then maaari na yung isang bata is merong language disorder. A language disorder can be receptive or expressive language disorder. So, yun na nga yung mga sinabi ko kanina sa table. So, children with communication disorder may also experience behavioral difficulties. So, yes, no? Kasi nga, nahihirapan silang mag-express kung ano yung gusto nilang sabihin. So, that could be, or that could lead na yung bata is magta-tantrum or di kaya magalitin. Yun, yung madaling magalit, masungit, gano'n. Because dahil meron silang communication disorder, nahihirapan silang i-express or sabihin kung ano yung gusto nilang sabihin. So, yun. No, because they struggle in expressing their needs and ideas, some children resort to inappropriate behaviors out of frustration, yun na nga, or to get the attention of significant others para makuha yung attention ng kinakausap niya, yung parents niya, gano'n, or yung teacher niya. Now, let's proceed sa universal design for learning. So, meron tayo ditong use of UDL in the classroom allows children to learn information, demonstrate understanding, and stay engaged in a multiple ways such as yung multiple means of presentation, expression, and engagement. So, because of the weakness na nagre-result from communication difficulties or disorders, which is teaching and learning practices as well as yung mga assessment should be presented in different modalities such as yung mga visual, auditory, and kinesthetic motor or tactile. Pag ganito, yung way of or yung mode of instruction mo or pag magpe-present ka pag ganito, then it will give opportunity for those students na may communication disorder na ano yung strength nila and to compensate with their weaknesses and a chance to be successful now in inclusive classroom. Let's have a meron tayo dito mga practical tips for the classroom. These are the tips na ginasuggest na gamitin ng mga teachers na may mga students na may communication difficulties that support the need ng mga bata in order to be successful at saka may matutunan sila inside the classroom. So, the following list, meron tayo ditong following list, provide practical suggestion that teachers can use in the classroom. So, first is we have here the allow the child to sit near the teacher and the blackboard away from auditory and visual distraction. So, alam natin na mga bata madali silang ma-distract. So, you need to make sure that your students especially yung mga bata na may communication disorder, is malapit siya sa iyo as a teacher at saka malayo siya sa windows and also the door. Kasi, doon kasi yung distraction sa labas, diba? So, you need to make sure na yung bata is nasa harapan mo or di kaya na malapit sa board para hindi siya madaling ma-distract. So, okay. Second is get the child attention before giving direction. Yes. So, such as pwede mo siyang tawagin yung name niya or di kaya use pre-arranged signal. Pwede mong itap yung table or di kaya itap mo siya sa shoulder. Yan. Para makuha lang yung attention ng bata when you are giving direction para makinig talaga sila. So, third is use pictures, charts, and other visual aids when explaining content to supplement auditory information. So, yun nga, as I said earlier na in UDL, diba, sa Universal Design Learning na gumamit ka ng mga pictures and videos for supplement, para pang supplement. So, yes, kinakailangan siya na gumamit ka ng pictures, charts, or the graphic organizer, and other visual aids para while nag-explain ka sa harap, then the content, meron kang supplementary sa likod mo or for auditory information ba sa mga bata na hindi nakakadinig or hindi maayos yung pandinig nila. So, kahit na nagsasalita ka dyan sa harapan, meron ka pa ding visual aids na mababasa nila. Okay? Then, pang-apat naman is we have here speak slowly and clearly without exaggerating speech. So, dito naman is may mga bata na hindi sila nakakaintindi, yung mga may communication disorder. Gaya nga yung sinabi ko kanina, sa expressive language disorder is may mga bata na mahirap. Doon pala sa sa receptive language disorder is may mga bata na hindi kaagad nakakaintindi or nahihirapan silang mag-response. So, one of the reason of this is yung pagsasalita mo. You need to speak slowly kasi baka hindi pala nila naiintindihan. Or, especially pag English, kasi pag English is mahirapan sila. Minsan pag, fast talk ka. So, you need to speak slowly, when you are discussing as a teacher. And, you don't need to exaggerate speech. Then, simplify the direction into short steps. So, ito, you need to be specific and to the point ka dapat sa mga instruction or di kaya direction na ibibigay mo sa mga bata na may communication disorder. Or not just that, even those students na normal lang, Then, break down multi-steps direction and give each one at a time. Instead na paulit-ulit mo siyang sasabihin. Meron tayong provide a written copy of direction for a task so the child can refer back to it his or her own pace. So, magbigay ka din ng handouts or di kaya written copy sa gina-discuss mo na lesson so that even though that they are at home or gusto nila i-review yung lesson, then meron silang matitingnan or meron silang mastudihan. Then, use gesture to clarify information. So, gumamit ka ng mga gesture pag nagdi-discuss ka to clarify information. Kasi ang pangit din naman, di ba, pag nagdi-discuss ka dyan, you're just standing, ganyan. So, para kang robot. So, you need to use gestures para mabuhayan yung mo. Then, it's clarify information. Okay, then use per-mediated instruction. When we say per-mediated instruction is i-prepare mo yung bata na may disability or communication disorder doon sa bata na normal lang or wala siyang difficulties. So, in this way kasi is yung bata na walang problems is sila yung magsaserve as a language models and learning bodies ng bata na may communication disorder. So, pwede silang magtulungan sa isa't isa. Okay. Then, provide extra time to prepare for oral language activities. Yes. So, wag mong anuhin yung bata na may communication disorder. Wag mo siyang tawagin, no? Wag mo siyang tawagin una pag nag-a-ask ka ng questions, pag may tanong ka, you should not or avoid asking questions first for the students na may communication disorders or impairments. So, kinakailangan na mas maganda pag yung typical language yung typical developing children, yung i-ask mo or yung walang difficulties to serve as a language models. Number 10, model correct language forms and use appropriate wait times, mga 3 to 5 seconds or more. So, yes, no, pag nagtatanong ka or nag-ask ka ng question, you need to wait, no, na yung bata magsagot kasi nagpa-process pa yung utak nila. Just like sa expressive language disorder, pag yung bata may expressive language disorder, di mahirapan siya mag-process ng information at saka mag-share ng ideas niya or di kaya mag-answer sa questions mo. So, you need to wait mga 3 to 5 seconds or more para magsagot yung bata. So, to give the child to give child time to think and respond. Number 11. So, we have number 11. Explicitly teach vocabulary that is needed in the learning context. So, kailangan magturo ka ng mga vocabulary that is related lang sa lesson mo to promote better comprehensions para sa mga bata. So, itong UDL, alongside with the accommodations, no, pati yung mga practical tips, no, na ginasuggest na gamitin ng mga teachers, no, in the future tayo. So, will help ensure that children with yung mga communication difficulties or disorders have a chance to be successful in an inclusive classroom. Let's proceed sa learners with difficulty moving or walking. So, dito lang, makikita natin na in this section, we will tackle about yung mga difficulty of moving or walking na naranasan ng mga bata. Anong types ba yun? Meron yan. And ano ba yung kinakailangan gawin sa mga bata na nakikitaan ng mga difficulty in moving or walking or di kaya may problems in motor skill, no? Here is the introduction. Sa section naman nito, gaya nga ng sabi ko kanina, focuses on learners with difficulty moving and or walking. Thus, focusing on physical and motor disabilities, their learning characteristic, abilities, and the support they need in an inclusive classroom. Okay, so meron tayo ditong definition. When a child has a difficulty sa pag-move or walking, the physical domain is affected. So, alam natin, no, pag yung bata, makikita natin talaga in real life, even pag makakita tayo ng mga bata na nahihirapang maglakad or di kaya mag-move, is yung physical appearance is affected. Pwedeng maliit yung kamay nila or wala silang kamay at paa. May problems na makikita sa physical appearance ng isang bata na may problem in moving or walking. So, learners with difficulty in moving or walking requires a specific accommodation or di kaya support to ensure they can access education effectively and fully participate in school activities. Kinakailangan talaga sila na pagtuunan ng pansin, no, yung mga bata na may difficulty sa mga paglakad, moving, para hindi sila ma-left behind. So, this accommodation may include yung mga modifications to the physical environment, adjustment to instructional materials. Siyempre, no, dapat mag-adjust din sa mga instructional materials na gagamitin kung okay ba sa kanila or ano ba sa kanila suitable. And alterations to assessment methods. Meron tayong tinatawag na developmental coordination disorder. Yan, when we see developmental coordination disorders, ito yung kakulangan or di kaya may problema in the motor skills ng isang bata. Yung mga difficulties na to are manifested as yung mga clumsiness. Example is dropping or bumping into objects, slowness, and inaccuracy of motor skill. Example niya is yung pag-catch ng object is hindi niya makatch or hindi niya makat ng maayos yung papel or di kaya pag nagugunting siya, hindi siya nagkakat ng maayos or hindi straight, ganon. And handwriting, hindi din maayos yung pagka-handwriting niya. Maaaring na lumagpas yung sa line, di ba may line yan pag write sa isang papel, then lumalagpas siya or di kaya hindi maayos yung pagka-write niya. And riding a bike, or a participating in sports. So, hindi siya pwede sa field na yan. Itong mga kakulangan na ito or di kaya problems na nasa isang bata, it really impact academic performance and other activities daily living sa mga bata na may problema sa motor skill disorder or impairments, which it do not result from intellectual disability or di kaya sa visual impairment or any neurological condition affected movement. Example is yung cerebral palsy. At meron din tayong tinatawag na dysprasia. When we say dysprasia, ito yung used synonymously with developmental coordinations disorder. So it is a term often used by occupational therapists. So itong dysprasia is that may kakulangan siya sa physical appearance, kung pwedeng putol yung paa niya or di kaya yung kanyang arms. So meron din tayong another type of motor problem na tinatawag na stereotypic movement disorder or SMD. It is characterized by repetitive, seemingly driven and non-functional motor behavior. So example niya is yung nag-handshake yung bata or di kaya weaving or body rocking, hit-banging, soft-biting, hitting on body. So meron na kaming neighbor na ganito sa amin, which is yung bata, lagi siyang nagka-clap. Pati yung ulo niya, laging nagaganon. So that is example of stereotypic movement disorder. Meron kasi siyang may disability yung bata. So yun yung mga niya, parang meron siya talagang stereotypic movement disorder kasi nagaganon yung ulo niya, tapos pabalik-balik lang yung movement niya, nagka-clap-clap siya. So yeah. So this behavior interfere with social, academic, or other activities and may result in self-harm. Yes, that's true. Or injury. Meron din tayong tinatawag na cerebral palsy. So itong cerebral palsy naman, this refers to a disorder of movement and posture, that result from damage to the areas of the brain that control motor movement. So, pwede siyang sa brain or di kaya sa spinal cord niya, which is it result na hindi siya lakad ng maayos, mag-move ng maayos because of that damage sa kanyang brain. This damage to the brain can occur before, during, or after birth due to an accident or injury. So, hindi lang pala siya pwedeng makuha ng bata at birth, but also pag na-aksidente siya, pwedeng during nasa sinapupunan pa siya, or di kaya pagkatapos niyang ianak due to an accident or injury. So muscle tone dito, tension in the muscle, it affects voluntary movement and full control of the muscle that result in delays in child's growth and fine motor development. So yun nga, pag nagka-damage sa muscle tone niya, yung mangyayari is there would be a delays in the child growth and fine motor development. So there are different classification ng cerebral palsy depending on which parts of the body yung naapektuhan. So, pwede siyang, pwede maapektuhan yung kanyang muscle tone and movement. So, meron tayong term na plegia. Itong term na plegia is from the Greek word meaning to strike. It is used with prefix that indicate the location of the movement. Meron tayo ditong table 6.4 which is classification of cerebral palsy. Una is meron tayong tinatawag na monoplegia. So itong monoplegia is isa lang yung legs na naapektuhan. Pwede siyang sa upper or sa lower. And yung hemiplegia naman, two limbs na yung naapektuhan dito in the same side. So both legs niya is naapektuhan. And yung triplegia naman from the word triple, so tatlo. So tatlo yung limbs are affected. Maaari yung dalawang legs niya and also one arm. So yun yung wala sa kanya or di kaya putol or wala talaga as in naapektuhan. Then yung quadriplegia. Yung quadriplegia naman is from the word quadri which is four. Both arms and legs yung naapektuhan. Wala siyang kamay, wala siyang paa. They are affected. So yung movement of the trunk and face may also be impaired. Mahihirapan siyang gumalaw. Pati yung trunk niya, yung dito, or di kaya yung ulo niya is mahihirapan din, sa paggalaw kasi wala na siyang paa, wala na siyang paa, wala na din siyang arms. So, that is quadriplegia. Okay. Now, meron din tayong tinatawag na diplegia. Itong diplegia naman, yung legs is affected siya, pero mas medyo severe involvement din sa arms. Medyo din yung may din sa arms niya affected pero hindi masyado. While yung double hemiplegia naman is yung impairment primary involves in the arms. So yung arms niya yung apektado while yung kanyang legs naman is medyo severe involvement pa din or merong pa ding mali sa kanya, mali, hindi mali, still affected yung kanyang legs pero hindi masyado. That are the classification of cerebral palsy. Okay, now let's proceed dito sa development coordination. Sa identification na tayo. So, meron tayo ditong developmental coordination disorder, which is identifying children with motor difficulties begins with family members. Just like doon sa communication disorder or impairment is, nagsisimula talaga dyan yung pag-i-examine or di kaya pag-consult sa isang bata as ini-examine talaga yan yung case history ng isang bata. Just like here, sa difficulties ng moving or walking na learners na, same pa din dito sa yung mga learners na nahihirapang maglakad or di kaya mag-move, kinakailangan pa din ng case history. So dito is i-examine yung family members, no? And early childhood practitioners. Developmental coordination disorder. So identifying children with motor difficulties begins with family members and early childhood practitioner. So upon noticing na yung bata is meron siyang it shows the difficulties or a delay in a fine or gross motor movements, then yung parents or di kaya yung teachers is dapat mag-ano kaagad sila. Action, no? To consult the child or di kaya yung bata in a general pediatrician who is torn may refer him to other specialists such as yung mga developmental pediatrician, a physical therapist, or an occupational therapist. So some signs that a child may have developmental coordination disorder is that is more than just typically difficult in moving or walking are presented. So, meron tayo ditong sa table 6.5. Ito yung mga sign of developmental coordination disorder na makikitaan sa isang bata. So, pag nakitaan nito, is dapat ipakonsult siya sa general pediatrician para ipaano siya sa specialist. So, sa early childhood, ito yung mga sign. Mga sign niya is meron tayong difficulty in tying shoelace. So, nahihirapan siyang magtali ng kanyang shoelace sa sapatos, buttoning sa damit niya or di kaya sa pants niya or di kaya sa palda, using spoon and fork, nahihirapan siyang gamitin kung paano gamitin, and getting dressed, hindi din niya alam. Then problems in jumping, skipping, catching, and kicking a ball. So, a higher tendency, to bump into things. Okay, mga clumsy sila. To fall over or to drop things. So, ito yung mga signs sa early childhood na meron silang early childhood na mga bata na meron silang developmental coordination disorder. Well, sa school age naman, this is yung early childhood, mostly this is kinder to 1. While yung school age naman, it is higher na. Or sa primary grades pa din, but higher. So, the difficulties in early childhood become more pronounced dito. Tries to avoid sport kasi nga may problem siya sa coordination disorder. So, that's why hindi siya sumasali sa mga sport. Ina-avoid niya yan. Then, works on writing tasks for a longer period of time. Yes, kasi matagal sila matapos eh. Paano ba matapos yung isang bata kung wala siyang kamay? Na diba, mahirapan siya tapusin ng madali yung kanyang task. In comparison to typically development peers. So, pag i-compare siya sa ibang bata is, matagal siya matapos pag nagsusulat. So, yan yung mga signs na yung bata is may developmental coordination disorder. In conducting an assessment, so yung specialist is gina-determine nila yung child development history ng isang bata. Same with the communication disorder, yung case history, di ba? I-examine nila yung history ng family, kung may problema ba sa napupunan yung isang bata, ganon. So the same here sa difficulties. Sa development difficulties in coordination disorder. In coordinate body movement, which includes throwing, jumping, walking, running, and maintaining balance, is ganito yung test nila or assessment sa bata na may difficulty in the motor skills, ganon. In conducting assessment, yung specialist determine the child's development history, intellectual ability, and gross and fine motor skills. So, same lang doon sa communication disorder is gina-examine yung case history ng isang bata and the physical movement niya. So, same lang din dito sa learners with difficulty sa paggalaw or di kaya sa paglakad. Okay, so to differentiate kung ano yung dalawa, itong gross motor skills tsaka fine motor skill, yung gross motor skills is ito yung involved dito yung mga large muscle ng isang bata. So, yung example niya is yung pag-throw niya, pag-jump, pag-walk, pag-running, and maintaining balance. Ito yung gross motor skill. On the other hand naman, yung fine motor skills is ito yung involved dito yung mga smaller muscles ng isang bata that are needed sa mga activities. Example niya, like yung mga writing, pag nagka-cut siya ng paper, and yung pagtatali niya ng shoelace and buttoning. So, yes, the evaluator needs to know when and how developmental milestone are achieved. So, this assessment is conducted to check the child's balance, no? Sensitivity to touch and performance in other gross and fine motor activities. In that way, sa pag-examine sa bata yung kanyang gross and fine motor skills is ma-determine kung meron nga bang problem or difficulties yung isang bata. Sa oral motor coordination naman dito is gina-examine dito in doing activities like yung pag-blow ng case or pag-blow out ng birthday candles, mga ganon, may also be reported. So, ganito yung examination for oral motor coordination ng isang bata. So, moreover, an evaluator would check for the following. Yung strength, tsaka flexibility by palpating muscle bulk and I'm not sure if I'm right, bulk and texture. Then, assessing flexibility of joints and the quality and intensity of grasp. And second is the motor planning, which includes dito yung pag-o-observe ng functional fine and gross motor skills and determining hand dominance ng isang bata or lack thereof. So, meron tayong tinatawag na stereotypic movement disorder or SMD. So, itong stereotypic movement disorder is similar siya. Steps are followed in the identification of the presence of stereotypic movement kanina sa disorder, sa communication disorder. Typically, developing children may display stereotypic movements. May mga disorder yan or behaviors often referred as, ito yung tinatawag na stereotypies. So, between ages siya, mga 2 and 5, as well as children with other neurological condition, such as yung mga autism spectrum disorder and other developmental disability. So because of this, specialists classify yung SMD or stereotypic movement disorder as primary. When it occurs in otherwise, yung typically developing child naman, yung mga normal child, is ginatawag silang secondary if it exists alongside other neurological disorder. Okay. Now, needed to ensure that they are given equal opportunities talaga. Dapat yung mga bata na may mga problems sa stereotypic disorder. So now, let's proceed sa learning characteristic. So, motor difficulties and disabilities are known to significantly alter a child's ability to perform daily activities, which include dito yung mga memory and perception and processing, planning, carrying out coordinated movements. Speech may also be affected as motor control is needed in articulations and productions. Moreover, yung developmental coordination disorder is nakaka-apekto din siya sa psychosocial functioning ng isang bata. So, merong report to have yung mga bata daw na merong itong tinatawag na developmental coordination disorder is that they have the lower level of self-efficacy and competence in physical and social domains. Experience more symptoms like yung mga nadideper sila, tsaka anxious. Yun yung mga bata na may mga symptoms sila na ganyan is meron silang stereotypic movement disorder. Yes. So, children with stereotypic movement disorder also tend to have mga low esteem. I mean, meron silang low self-esteem and have been reported to be withdrawn. So, wala talaga silang tiwala sa mga sarili nila. On the other hand naman, a range of strength needs to be acknowledged in every child with disability. So, students with motor movement disorder may excel in other areas of intelligence. Yes. Pag yung bata nga is merong motor movement disorder o may problema sa motor movement is they may excel or mas magaling sila sa other areas sa intelligence. Yung mga students or mga bata na may disorder sa motor movement is mas magaling sila sa other areas such as yung intelligence kasi hindi naman kinokontrol ng ating motor functions. So, they may have adequate intelligence. Mga creative sila and language skills depending on the severity of the disorder and the present support team adult. In fact, some children and adults who are physically handicapped or may problema kapansanan or have mga cerebral palsy is natutunan nilang mag-paint with their mouths. Yung mga may problema sa, yung mga walang kamay, walang paa, is kahit na may problema sila, meron silang impairments, disorder, is nakakapag-paint pa din sila or nakakapag-draw, no? Using their mouth. Ito yung ginagamit nila sa pag-draw. So, may mga tao na ganyan, even in the Philippines. I saw in the, if I'm not mistaken, sa Jessica Soba yun, na magaling siya mag-draw using his mouth. Ang galing niya. So, yun na nga, even though na meron siyang disorder in a motor movement, magaling naman siya when it comes to mga creativity sa intelligence. So, yes, no? So, some children may do well in logical thinking also. So, may mga bata na magaling din sa logical thinking and comprehension and even in writing using assistive technology. Hence, no, for children na with motor difficulties naman and disabilities, kinakailangan din ng support system and accommodation sa mga bata na yun. So, yun naman, kinakailangan talaga ng support system to ensure that they are given equal opportunities. Kasi nga, kawawa naman, di ba? May mga kapansanan sila. So, they need the support system for access and learning experience in school alongside their typical developing peers, no? Kahit pa man na nakikiano sila alongside with yung mga peers nila na normal, is hindi sila left behind, and also kinakailangan talaga nila ng accommodation and support. So, general education adaptation na tayo. So, first and foremost, children with motor difficulties and disabilities is kinakailangan talaga ng primary intervention with specialists or such as yung mga physical and occupational therapies. So, these professionals are responsible for setting goals in motor development, planning, and mobility, as well as in providing teachers and other with information about the child physical condition limitation. So, pag nakitaan ka agad na yung bata is there's a problem in a motor development or movement, then kinakailangan na ipakonsult na siya sa specialist. Physical accessibility of a school and classroom to children with motor difficulty or disability is essential. Kinakailangan talaga, as I said earlier, kinakailangan nila ng support system. So, dapat yung buildings is i-consider din yung mga students na may disabilities, especially yung naka-wheelchair, di ba? Kaya dapat yung mga hagdanan is may mga pang-wheelchair na para makadaan yung wheelchair. And also, pwede din magumamit ng elevator for school na with multiple levels of buildings. Kinakailangan talaga siya. It is necessary, as well as yung provision of wheelchairs. So, providing such structure at saka support sa mga students na may disabilities in motor is it will ensure that children with motor difficulty and disability would be able to access as well as move around in the classroom safely. So they are to make them comfortable, to make them para fear din sa kanila. Kasi nga kinakailangan talaga nila ng support. So paano ba sila makakalaka doon sa hagdanan na normal lang na hagdanan na naka-wheelchair man? So kinakailangan gumawa din ng hagdanan na for those students na naka-wheelchair. So, the type of accommodation given will always be relative to the strength, abilities, and difficulties of the child. So, sa mga bata na may developmental coordination or di kaya stereotypic movement disorder, which is they struggle or hindi sila makakasulat but has an adequate articulation or language skills, pwede sila makabeneficyo from being accommodation in the way na i-understand and demonstrate in the way of understanding is demonstrated, such as yung response. Some of the recommendation for a child with such profile may include the following. So, meron tayo dito mga wait lang. So, assigning an adult or peer to be ascribed in a completion rating task, me, he, and option. So, just like as I said kanina, yung peer mediated, na kung saan yung normal student or typically developed student is ipapartner siya doon sa bata na may difficulty or disorder. Para naman is magtulungan sila at maging language, di ba kanina sa communication, sa communication disorder is sila yung nagiging model or language model ng bata na may difficulty. So, dito is kinakailangan din to accomplish written task may be option. And para sila yung magaguide ba? Being given a pencil or pen grave and different size kasi hindi natin may mga bata na nahihirapan sa sa taller size or di kaya malaking size na pencil or pag maliit lang yung pencil. So, kinakailangan na mag-provide ng pencil na in the different size for those with poor fine motor skills. So, may mga walang kamay, di ba? So, especially yung nagagamit lang ng mouth ng mga bata kasi wala silang arms, then they really need a taller one, no, pencil. So, meron tayo ditong table 6.6 which is, ito yung mga classroom accommodation for children na may developmental coordination disorder or stereotypic movement disorder. Una is meron tayong una is meron tayong responses. So, yung description niya is you need to assign a peer or adult as scribe for note-taking. So, ito yung pwede ka mag-assign or ipapartner mo sila sa bata or di kaya sa adult na walang problems or difficulties para sila yung magsulat or note-taking. Then, use different sizes of paper and graph paper. So, same lang doon sa pencil, no? Then, try different writing tools and pencil grips. So, yun nga. Dapat different sizes yung pencil kasi may mga bata na mas kailangan nila ng mahaba ng pencil kasi wala silang kamay so they were just going to use their mouth. And, use a word processor or computer. Use a text-to-speech programs. And allow for oral recitation, test taking to supplement written tasks, and provide alternate assessment methods. Okay. Meron din tayong seating. So, dito naman, you need to allow for preferential seating near the teacher. So, yun yung sinabi ko kanina na doon sa communication disorder na dapat na yung bata is malayo siya sa distraction. So, you need to make sure na away sila sa door or di kaya sa window. Dapat malapit sa iyo or di kaya sa board yung bata na nakaupo. Then, adjust chair or desk height to maximize posture and stability. Siyempre, no, pag sobrang taas naman ng table, so hindi mabot ng bata, no? So, kailangan na i-adjust yung chair or di kaya yung table. And, place a non-skid mat on the chair. So, ito yung yung para comfortable sila pag umupo. Minsan kasi na yung inuupuan nila is uncomfortable sila, no? Or di kaya masakit sa kanila. So, especially to yung mga bata na walang legs or limbs. So, you can put or place skid mat sa chair nila. Then, provide opportunities for movement, breaks. So, in your classroom, kinakailangan din na ipabreak din natin yung mga bata, no? Or di kaya, there are areas na kung saan pwede sila maglaro. Then, schedule. So, sa schedule naman, you need to allow extra time to complete test and writing assessment. So, same lang din siya kanina na dapat nabigyan mong time, yung sa communication disorder na bigyan mong time na magsalita yung bata or magsagot. So, dito din is kinakailangan bigyan mo sila ng extra time para tapusin yung mga test and writing assessment. Kasi nga, nahirapan sila magsulat. So, hindi talaga madaling matapos. Lalo na yung walang kamay. So, di ba? Yung ginamit lang nila is mouth. So, you need to give extra time for them to finish. Then, provide extra time to change for physical educational classes. So, pag nag-change na sila ng damit or di kaya, yung costume nila dyan. Okay. Then, lastly is yung others. So, dito naman, yung photocopy notes and homework reminders for the child. So, ito yung magbigay ka ng written copy or di kaya photocopy ng handouts para even though nandun sila sa bahay nila, ma-remind yung bata or di kaya hindi siya mag-study. Allow to take photos of notes and homework reminders. Kung merong cellphone yung bata, then why not, i-allow nyo sila na mag-take ng pictures instead of writing since na mahirapan silang mag-write, di ba? Then give advanced organizer. So, magbigay ka ng advanced organizer before ka mag-deliver sa lesson mo. Or di kaya, this is to make your lecture lesson. And remove writing tasks. Then, send lectures, handouts via email. So, pwedeng via email or di kaya pwede messenger. Total, meron naman tayong messenger ngayon. Or pwedeng sa Google Classroom. So, that's all for my report. And thank you so much.